Hey everyone. Liberals prepare to reveal 2018 immigration plan they say will boost economy and help refugees. They say strategy must address global migration crisis and labor gaps across Canada. Labor gaps, right? So that's keyword, that's code word for keeping wages suppressed, like they've been for the last 4 decades, and got even worse after such things as the NAFTA agreement or this push for globalization or the temporary foreign worker program. There's been multiple ways the central planning, the control freaks, and the crony corporatists among us have used the power of the state to benefit the connected class, those people that seek to rule over you or to dictate the terms and how you live in this country. They are the ones that have been assuming and accumulating massive amounts of power for decades now with the helpful hand of central planning elites and those in academia as well. Whatever 25, 30 million, whatever that number is or where it lands in between those two numbers, but it's somewhere along that lines, of adult Canadians that work in this country, this has never been a net positive for you. It is what I have coined the race to the bottom. And unless you're a willing participant and wanting to race down to the bottom, then you're going to be left in the dust or kicked to the curb in this modern, current political environment. Kathleen Harris, which is a senior writer for CBC, is who's writing this particular article. The Liberal government is finalizing its 2018 immigration plan, aiming to strike the right balance amid a global migration crisis, a surge in illegal border crossers, and persistent labor gaps across the country. Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussein recently wrapped up cross-country consultations and is preparing to table the annual immigration levels in the House of Commons by the November 1st deadline. As he sets next year's target for the number of newcomers allowed into the country, the government's goal is to attract top talent in a competitive global market while reuniting families and offering refuge to people displaced by disaster and conflict. So, before I continue on, I've already made a video in the past, and actually I would have probably already uploaded it prior to this video being uploaded, called The Great Replacement. The social contract that you might have believed or perceived to exist in this country, the central planning elites, especially the Liberals, but even the Conservatives and definitely the NDP, they've ripped it up. All they got is dollar signs in their eyes and their ability to bring in more and more serfs, subjects, or slaves that will greatly benefit the ruling class in this country. They don't give a shit about the domestic population anymore. They've foregone even attempting to entice or bring under the fold, especially those of us who are part of the Generation X. Right? They know that, we can't be fucking led around like fucking bunch of mindlessly obedient sheep, and we're not conformists or loyal lapdogs. So they're looking, like I say, they're looking elsewhere as a means to sustain this system, so that when they go off into retirement, that they'll be able to live freely and relaxed and as entitled as they've always been, without having to have any fear of reprisal or an uprising or a revolution against them. That's the reality of the facts, folks. The truth of the matter is, the ruling class are seeking to replace an entire segment of the demographics of Canada as a stopgap measure to sustain their current corrupt political and economic system. Canada's immigration system continues to be based on compassion, efficiency, and economic opportunity for all while protecting the health, safety, and security of Canadians, reads the statement from Hussein to CBC News, right? You witnessing that in your own personal life? I mean, like I say, these are just bullshit platitudes and propaganda put forth by your central planning control freaks and sociopaths or the elite that want to constantly keep your mind indoctrinated in believing that they have your best interest at heart. And if you fall for that, well, hey, I don't know what else to tell you, folks. I've got, like I say, over 460 videos at this stage trying to help educate and inform the rest of Canada to this kind of shit. But hey, if you're unwilling to listen, well, you don't have to. But the reality is going to play out going forward, and you're going to really regret not paying attention at that point. Canada's system of immigration has been recognized internationally as a thoughtful, responsible approach that takes into consideration the need for more immigrants while balancing our fiscal and global responsibilities. So they need more taxers and cash cows, is what they're saying. Conservative immigration critic Michelle Rempel said the government has so far failed to develop a sound strategy to ensure immigrants help fill labor gaps in certain sectors and in remote and less populated parts of the country. So, I actually have paid attention to Michelle Rempel. She puts a lot of live videos out on Facebook, and based on the historical precedent and the kind of stuff she espouses usually and quite consistently, this seems to be a misrepresentation of what she stands for. I highly doubt Miss Rempel is all about bringing in these legal or illegal immigrants. Something tells me the CBC and this particular Kathleen Harris is parsing some of the words that she might have espoused as a means to try to create even more legitimacy, especially for those that would be following Michelle, like more people of the conservative or libertarian bent, right? So, once again, this is just political propaganda, it's bullshit, trying to put forth the kind of dialogue, the kind of narrative that will lead you to believe that, oh no, maybe I should agree with it because Michelle is kind of going along with it too, right? Yeah, don't fall for this shit, Canada, please. There are some bigger policy questions around how the government is incenting people in high unemployment areas to be matched with existing work, and how the government is going to seek to pull people that are coming into the country, new Canadians, instead of becoming isolated in small pockets in major urban centers. How perhaps those streams could be used to bolster immigration needs in areas of high demand in the country where people aren't settling, she told CBC News. So basically, like I say, and this whole excuse about, oh, we need them because there's Canadians that won't work in these particular industries and these particular fields, really? Like I say, stop giving all these goddamn pretenses of having all these social safety nets or coddling them, and I guarantee they would assume the roles and tasks that you're referring to. This is the problem. You create a dependent class that feels entitled to so many things and don't feel they have to work for a living. Well, that's what you've created. And especially from the millennials, like that generation, like, yeah, I can understand why you're worried, but hey, that's your own fucking fault, especially those of you old professional boomers that had your kids later on in life. Hey, you're the ones that fucked up your kids, not anyone else. And stop trying to force the rest of us in Canada to make up or compensate for your shortcomings. And as far as trying to bolster the population and bringing some of these immigrants in to take care of the elderly, in some of these areas where these immigrants aren't settling, like in rural or small towns in, maybe the Atlantic provinces or some of the other western provinces, some of these smaller cities, towns, and villages, stop trying to, listen, there are countless millions of Canadians that would love to be back, and I'm one of them, to be back. I'd love to be back in New Brunswick, taking care of my very, very elderly grandmother, my elderly mother, and many other members of my family or members of my community that I would love to be able to help and benefit, not just economically, but in many other areas. But I'm not going to do it if I'm offered slave labor wages. I can't do it. I will not function under that kind of economic environment, nor will most Canadians. And it has nothing to do with it being entitled by any stretch of the imagination. My economic reality has to reflect the economic environment that I have to function in, right? That's just a reality. But yet they don't want to do what's right so that we, people like myself, can go to some of these areas that are seeing a great massive decline in people in the workforce, taxpayers. Instead, they're looking to bring these foreigners, these immigrants, to assume those roles and tasks instead. Like, how fucking immoral is that? Like I say, the social contract at this stage of the game, I mean, let's just admit it all, folks, okay? It's been torn up already by these central planning elitists. Rempel said Canada's 2018 immigration plan must adapt to an extreme change in context with a spike in asylum seekers and an escalating global migration crisis. She said the government must do more to ensure refugees are properly integrated and become productive members of the workforce. So once again, they're misrepresenting. Now, if they are coming into this country, right, then I would completely agree with what Michelle's saying. But once again, like I say, this hack in CBC is completely misrepresenting the position that Michelle has. There is a big discussion here, and the Levels report means a lot, she said. Canadians are going to be looking at it in terms of whether or not the system is working, and that's a pretty big question. Asylum seekers who have crossed into Canada outside border points are not included in the Levels plan, according to Hussein's office. The 2017 immigration plan called for 300,000 immigrants, boosting numbers in the economic class that include skilled workers. So, like I said, even bringing people in to compete for skilled position. So all you Canadians that went to our public indoctrination/education centers and paid huge amounts of money, well, you haven't paid for it yet. You probably got a lot of student loan and debt, right? But assumed that kind of debt for the pretense of going into these occupations. Well, hey, like I say, the central planners and governments and these crony corporations, well, they're going to bring in foreign immigrants to compete with you for those jobs, for those positions, for those occupations. Business people and caregivers, as well as an increase in the family class for sponsored spouses, partners, children, parents, and grandparents. So that's another thing. Because things have become so expensive through debt enslavement and inflation created by this government and the central bank, you can't afford to have barely one or two kids. Hey, they'll bring in immigrants that'll take up the slack as far as that goes. But once again, they're going to be incentivized for having these huge families and going to be rewarded for such, whether they're on the public dole, right? Because, I mean, if you're on welfare, you actually make more than people that work in the private sector. That's a reality. That's a fact in Canada. But like I say, it's just going along completely of what I was saying. It's called the Great Replacement. Well, that's the moniker. That's the phrase I have coined in regards to this push for mass immigration and globalization. NDP immigration critic Jenny Kwan called on the government to be more ambitious with its 2018 plan, insisting immigration is the best way to offset an aging population and fill significant labor gaps. Well, sure it is, if you don't give a shit about the social contract or any pretense of the family unit or what it used to mean to have any kind of homogeneity or understanding of we take care of each other mentality, right? Any sense of nationalism. I suppose if you strip all that away, which the Trudeau liberals have been doing, I suppose it makes sense. Yeah, hey, forget about the domestic population, you know. Think of this as if you had a farm, right? Yeah, forget about the livestock that we got. Let's just go slaughter them and use what ones that are still at least remotely decent or young enough. We'll use them for their meat to sustain ourselves for a little while longer. But hey, forget the domestic population. Hey, we've got livestock from all over the world that we can bring in and get it really, really cheaply. So, yeah, well, why would we care about the domestic population, right? Forget about these domestic tax serfs, slaves, and subjects. Listen, they're not conforming in the manner that we demand of them. So, hey, fuck them. Let's bring on a whole new influx of these immigrants. They'll do it. They'll do everything we ask of them. You watch. Watch and learn, right? That's the psychology. That's the mentality of these people. Federal policy must focus on bringing in a balanced and diverse range of immigrants instead of focusing on high-skilled workers for permanent residents and relying on temporary foreign workers for lower-skilled jobs. So like I say, they're expanding it. It's not just skilled workers. It's not that they're just looking for skilled workers that will be productive members of this society. It's like, basically, like I said, the gloves are off. They ripped up the contract, and they're just like, hey, bring all the new ones in. Fuck the domestic population. Hey, they'll either get in line or they'll be pushed at the back of the bus. Either way, the ruling class, they don't give a shit. As long as they benefit in the end. Why can't we use our immigration system to meet the labor skills shortage? The full range of it, not just one sector in the economy. We have a full need with a full range of different labor skills that are required in Canada, and we should be bringing in an immigration policy that reflects that, she said. So yeah, why would we even try to help our domestic population, try to increase their purchasing power and their wages that have been stagnating or decreasing for the last 40 years, right? No, we're not going to do that. Like I say, listen, they haven't raced down far enough. We want them to go much further, and they're still refusing to do so. So, hey, the great replacement, that's the answer to their question, and how they continue to maintain this established system of slavery and indentured servitude and forced subjugation. Kwan also said at a time of mass migration and displacement, Canada should lift the cap on privately sponsored refugees and bring in more who are assisted by the government. Like I say, holy shit, man. No loyalties here whatsoever. Like I say, and when Trudeau says that, yeah, Canada has no identity or anything, well, not only is he right, because, I mean, look at the reality here. They don't identify. They could care less, man. They don't, like I say, to them, there is no, and I mean, I would normally agree with them that, yeah, this pretense of a social contract is completely bullshit, but hey, we're forced to pay into it. We're forced to live under the paradigm of the pretense that we signed it, right? That's the whole pretense of why they can tax us fucking almost to death, right? And completely control, dictate, and micromanage your life is because, well, that's all part of the social contract. You know, we'll give you a little bit of this, but you have to give us some pretense of authority. But like I say, the authorities are saying, hey, fuck it. I don't care about you people anymore. Hey, my focus now is elsewhere. Janet Dench, Executive Director of the Canadian Council for Refugees, says Canada could easily bring in 20,000 more each year, yet in 2017 the target was set at 7,500. It's very tiny. There's over 1 million refugees that the UNHCR has identified as in need of resettlement. So for Canada to only resettle 7,500 is really far below the need and far below Canada's capacity, as we showed with the Syrian refugees in 2016, she said. We know we have the capacity, which they brought into what? In excess of 40,000? That's in excess of the 300+ thousand legal immigrants, and that's in excess of the what? I don't know how many tens of thousands of these illegal asylum seekers are coming into this country. But like I say, I mean, talk about a bunch of sellouts. I mean, holy shit, right? I mean, I'm not a fan of the state or government or even this pretense of Canada as being one big giant happy family of nationalism, but even I would never wish to sell out my fellow Canadians in this kind of manner, right? Like, holy shit, man. These people are vile. They're despicable. They literally seem to hate you for not being loyal, obedient serfs and subjects to their whims, to their edicts. Dent suggested the Liberal government's Syrian refugee effort was a way of checking off the box for refugees instead of making a strong, sustained commitment. The government's Advisory Council on Economic Growth had recommended that Canada boost its immigration level to 450,000 by 2021 to stimulate the economy and tackle an aging population and low birth rate. But the aging population, low birth rate is all a direct reflection and consequence of the kind of bullshit that has been propagated and put forth as part of the educational system and the economic and political system in this country for decades now. So an aging population and low birth rates are a direct consequence of central planning fucking dictates and mandates, and rather than admit that what they did was wrong, they're like, fuck, we don't have to worry about that. We'll just turn elsewhere. We'll just paint over all the issues, right? Instead of deal with them or looking at them head on, we'll just paint over them. We'll just bring in all these new tax serfs to compensate or make up for our shortcomings. Patrick Snyder, Director of Skill and Immigration Policy for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, said higher immigration levels bring potential for business and boosting Canada's competitiveness, but whether it succeeds depends on the approach. He said the government must target newcomers with the right skills for in-demand occupations, yet the current ranking system focuses strictly on education and technical specifications instead of being more flexible to tap those with intelligence, drive, and trainability. There are high-skilled people who have gained their knowledge through job experience who are in demand in Canada. They might not necessarily have technical degrees, but they have skills that are needed for Canadian companies, Snyder said. Adapted rules could recruit self-taught people in the high-tech programming and graphic design fields, for example, who didn't go through a university program but have the valuable skills employers need. So like I say, all you millennials that went and paid all these ridiculous prices for your higher education, right, through these fucking indoctrination, I mean, universities and colleges in Canada, they're saying, hey, well, we'll just bring people, even if they're not credentialed, they'll work cheaper and they might very well be just as competent. And that may very well be the case. But like I say, they're once again proven. This is just more proof that, yeah, they're selling you up the river. So it's not just Generation X that they're willing to sell up the river. That's pretty much been a foregone conclusion for those of us in that demographic for quite a while now. But I'm hoping you millennials will come to the terms to realize that you're being sold up the river too. Just your time hasn't quite come yet. You're just not quite at the same age range that we are. But when you do get to this point, and by that time it'll be much too late, obviously, but you will come to realize just how fucking bad your grandparents, the boomer generation, the boomer cohorts, those that have been running fucking governments and these crony corporations for decades now, you'll come to realize at some stage of the game that, yeah, don't fall for the bullshit platitudes and their empty smiles that they might give you to your face. As soon as you turn your back, yeah, they're pulling out the shank, man, and they're looking to fucking put it in there the minute you don't fucking do what they want you to do, right? Anyways, this video has gone on quite a long time. It's a fairly long and extensive article. We're getting down closer to the end, but there's still a fair amount of it left. I will put a link to it in the description of this video below. But once again, I can't hammer away enough at the fact that these central planners, these authoritarians, these control freaks, these sociopaths are looking to replace the domestic population. And it's up to you, Canadians, to, take it upon yourself, the task and the responsibility to stand firmly against this shit. Because once it happens, like by then it'll be too late. Complaining after the fact or standing up for yourself in opposition to this shit after the fact, when it's safe to do so, that's, first of all, it's cowardly, and it will be much, much too late at that time. It will become impossible to unwind this. I mean, think about it. To unwind it, what are you going to do? What are you going to do look to in the future when you do come to recognize and realize how right people like me are? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Get government to round up, right, millions of people and try to force them out of this country? I mean, that's not going to work out very well, nor would it be ethical or moral in any way. So doing the right thing in the here and now, instead of procrastinating and waiting till that cold hard reality smacks you in the face to the point where you can no longer deny it. Well, if you wait to that point, like I say, I mean, hopefully at that stage, if you do, if things do get to that point, I've already me and my wife and the people I care about, we've already fucking found our way into some fucking cabin in the woods and just won't even give a shit about what the hell the fucking world outside of our own little area. We won't even give a shit how bad things get at that point. Just, hey, you brought it on yourself. We tried to warn you. You didn't want to listen. Well, now you're going to have to deal with the consequence and ramification for your ineptness, for your complacency, and for your apathy. It's the Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.